Hey, my storytelling friends. I'm Steve Garvin here with my friend and fellow masterminder, Dawn Hancy. And we are coming together for this special episode of The Golden Measure, where we take a step closer to greater prosperity. And the question for today is, who owns your story? When I suggested that to Dawn, her response was, ooh, what a provocative question. Who owns your story? Dawn, have you ever considered that idea before?
Well, the first thing that occurs to me now is that that implies that someone does own it. And what does ownership mean? So does it have to be one person? I kind of feel like multiple people own my story in a way. Um, the word possession can have different meanings too. Who possesses it? Who has a piece of it, right? Or the possessive in grammar, we might say that's my sister, but that's a relationship. That doesn't mean I own her. So I guess that I'm just sort of free associating here, but that kind of takes me to the idea of a relationship with our story, with my story. I have a relationship with my story, and so do many other people.
And yeah, great point. A lot of people are impacted by the story that you're living into and expressing that. And sometimes that takes place in a formal setting, such as, we're doing a Facebook Live and there are viewers who are joining us. And sometimes it takes place in a less formal and less structured way where, we go about our day and we impact and are impacted by many other stories that are happening concurrently.
Right.
When I think about owning your story, and the reason I was thinking about this was honestly in line with how does the flow proceed, right? So when I am expressing myself, am I expressing myself because someone else told me to express myself? Am I expressing myself because, society says that, or our culture says that as marketers and as entrepreneurs, that we need to go out and express ourselves? Or am I expressing myself because I want to express myself? I have a message that I want to deliver. I like the nuance that you bring in with regards to where does the possession lie? And do we own that story? Do we own and how much of that story can we own ourselves? Right? That I can own the expression of my story. I can own the delivery of my story. I am, as I like to say, not only the author of my story, but also the publisher of my story and the promoter of my story, among other roles. But as soon as I express and share that story with someone else, whether that be with you, Dawn, or with those who are joining us on social media, we each have our own opportunity to take that story and make of it what we will. I have no control over what you do with my story. I have control over how I express my story and how I share my story. So, and part of what I was thinking about with regards to this yesterday was the idea is that in not only is there an expression of my story, but there's also the value of my story. And one way I was actually thinking about this in terms of cash flow, that if I watch the cash in my business, in my life, and which direction it's flowing, am I receiving benefit from sharing my story? Are the people receiving benefit from it? Who is benefiting the most from the expression of my story, both financially and in other ways? And by doing kind of an audit of that flow of stories, I can see more clearly who is owning that story, right? who's benefiting from that story.
It's interesting you put it that way because just this morning I was working on putting some testimonials on my website from former, well, current Reiki students. We're not in class right now, although I'm getting ready to start a virtual class soon. But I had sent out some surveys to the last couple of classes that I had taught, asking them, how they felt about the class and their own practice, what else they would like to learn, what else they need help with, and so forth, and how Reiki's positively impacting their life, or what they feel they're developing well in their own talents and aspects of what they're learning. And I had such a good time looking back at those surveys and the results and the reflection and the so talk about sharing a story, right? Sharing ownership of the story. It's this dialogue, the back and forth. There was the experience in the class, the experience of the surveys, and then sometimes on surveys I ask people, is it okay if I share this, or anonymously or with your name or not at all? And people have the choice.
Mm.
And so I get to share ownership of their stories a little bit, where someone said, I feel much more calm and less anxiety. And other people, have said that it's more like life changing, or they feel good, so good being able to help someone else, and yet it's helping themselves as well. And so I really love being able to kind of embed those little pieces of their story into my story that I'm offering to help become your story, someone else's story, looking at the website or reading my promotional material. And it really is the idea that we share stories. How can we
Mm.
have a story that's ours alone? Maybe we can though. Oh, that's a good question. Mhm.
And that brings up another thought that I was having regarding that, and that is, as we own our story, and I don't mean that necessarily as in title and deed type of thing, but when we
Mhm.
take responsibility for our story and the creation of our story and the expression of our story, then as we enrich our story, then we have more, our story has more value not only for ourselves, but also we have the opportunity to enrich other lives through the expression of our story.
Mhm. Mhm.
That collectively, as we all share each other's story and contribute to each other's story, then we can make the world a brighter place, easier to navigate through the dark forests of our lives, and so forth, and to get to those cheery castles on the other side. So,
Exactly. And as you know, genealogy is another passion of mine. And so I
mm,
feel like there's a real shared story, that lineage, those lineages, and I'm helping to try to uncover and bring to light the stories of my ancestors and to really honor them without having known those people well, other than the living relatives, of course, that I do. But how is that part of my story? And as I've shared with you before, Steve, a few examples of how it feels like the ancestors are just leading me around. I keep ending up going to literal places where they lived, and
mm,
I live there, and I feel drawn to them, and or to work there, or to somehow work with those places or the themes that were in their lives that come up again in my life. And it's quite mysterious and amazing, but it feels like I am carrying the thread of the story forward. But the same can be said in a way with our clients as well. So those folks who did the survey, my students, they came from somewhere. They came to the class with a reason why they want to become Reiki healers, practice for themselves, help their families, whatever. They come with a story, and then our stories kind of merge. And
mm,
often the way that students interact in the class is so powerful, and then go back out into the world and practice Reiki for ourselves, use it with our families, become part of the Essential Arts Reiki community, or part of the larger Reiki community as well. And what I'm hearing from you too is that story does help connect us within our community, as well as strengthening our own voice. I guess that is kind of what does belong to us. And again, where does it stop? And the influences begin, but we can have kind of a center or a core that is our own, is what it
mm.
feels like.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you're bringing genealogy into it, because when I think about my own ancestors, most of them, well, the vast majority, I've never met. They all, by the time I was born, most of my ancestors were gone.
Mhm.
And but yet, as I live and as I learn more of their stories, I realize just how impacted I am by the lives whose of people who I've never personally met. And similarly, when it's kind of like the idea of the butterfly flapping its wings and off the coast of
Mhm.
Argentina or something, that it impacts our experience here, wherever we may be, here in North Carolina or up in Vermont or that uh, that we all impact each other. It might not be felt directly, it might not be seen directly, but that we can own our experience so the flapping of our wings can have a positive effect on the world. So, in conclusion, my invitation to you, our viewers, is to own your story and to consider, what does that mean, and how do you want to own your story? How do you want to bring it out and express it into the world? And what is the impact that you want that expression to have upon your own audience? Until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark night. And thank you, Dawn, for joining us for this special episode of the Golden Measure Show.
You're so welcome. Thanks for inviting me.